I stood there in the boardroom holding my coffee mug when my sister Margaret made the announcement that I was no longer needed at Harper Industries, the company our father built from nothing over 40 years ago. Margaret sat at the head of the mahogany table in her new designer suit, her perfectly styled gray hair catching the morning light. "Your services are no longer required, David," she said without even looking at me. I nodded calmly and couldn't stop the smile spreading across my face. "See you tomorrow," I replied. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Margaret's face turned red. "Did you not hear me, David? You're fired?" "Oh, I heard you, Margaret," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "I'll be here at 8 as usual." The thing is, I knew something Margaret didn't know, something that would make the next morning very interesting. "Indeed, let me take you back 6 months to understand how we got here. Our father, Thomas Harper, was a giant of a man, not in size but in spirit. He started Harper Industries in 1978 with nothing but a used truck and a dream. He built it into a manufacturing company that employed 300 families in our town. I was 58 years old and had worked alongside Dad since I was 22, fresh out of college with my engineering degree ready to learn everything. Margaret was 55 and had joined the company 10 years after me. She went to business school, got her MBA, and came in as a financial consultant. Dad always treated us equally. He never played favorites, even though I had been there longer. Margaret was brilliant with numbers, I'll give her that. She could look at a spreadsheet and see patterns that would take me hours to find, but she never understood the heart of the business, the people who made it run. Every Friday, Dad would walk the factory floor. He knew every worker by name. He knew their kids' names, their birthdays when someone was going through a hard time. I learned to do the same. Margaret stayed in her office with the door closed. When Dad got sick 2 years ago, everything changed. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 18 out of pure stubbornness and love for the company he built. Those last months were hard. Margaret and I took turns staying with him at the hospital. During one of my nights there, Dad held my hand, with what little strength he had left. "David," he whispered, "I need to tell you something about the company." "Rest, Dad." I said, "You can tell me when you're stronger." "No," he insisted, "I need you to know this now." He explained something to me that night, something he had set up years ago that nobody else knew about, not the lawyers, not the accountants, not Margaret. It was his insurance policy, he called it, a way to make sure the company stayed true to its values no matter what happened. After Dad passed, Margaret and I shared the role of co-executives for a year. It was in his will that we would run the company together. But Margaret had other plans. She started talking about modernization, efficiency, restructuring, those corporate buzzwords that sound good but usually mean people lose their jobs. "We need to cut costs, David," she said during one of our meetings. "We're carrying too much overhead." "Those are people, Margaret," I reminded her. "People with families, mortgages, kids in college. They're line items on a balance sheet, David. We can't be sentimental." That's where we differed. I saw human beings. She saw numbers. The tension grew over those 12 months. Margaret started making moves. She brought in consultants who had never set foot in a factory. They walked around with clipboards and tablets making notes. The workers started getting nervous. I tried to reassure them, but I could only do so much. Then Margaret made her big play. She found a loophole in Dad's will. A clause that said if one CO executive voluntarily stepped down, the other would assume full control. She offered me a deal. "Step down voluntarily," she said, "and I'll give you a generous retirement package. You can enjoy your golden years, David. Travel, spend time with your grandkids. And if I don't," I asked, "then we'll be locked in this battle forever. The company will suffer. Is that what you want?" I thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. "No, Margaret, I'm not stepping down." Her face hardened. "Fine. Then we do this the hard way." She called an emergency board meeting, presented a case that the company needed singular leadership, that our dual management was causing confusion and inefficiency. She had charts and graphs. She had testimonials from the consultants she'd hired. She had everything except the truth. The board voted 7-3 in her favor, just like that she became CEO, and her first act was to fire me. Which brings us back to that boardroom, standing there with my coffee watching Margaret's face turn red. Next morning would be fun, I had said, because I knew what Margaret didn't. When Dad set up his insurance policy, he created a special provision. If I was ever terminated from the company without cause, a clause would activate. The company charter would automatically call for a complete review. And during that review, all major decisions would be frozen, including terminations. But more than that, the review would be conducted by someone Dad had appointed years ago, someone who understood the company's true values. Our Uncle Frank, Dad's younger brother, who had helped him start the business. Frank had retired 15 years ago and moved to Florida. But he still held a special advisory position that could only be activated under specific circumstances. My termination was one of those circumstances. I went home that evening and called Uncle Frank. He answered on the second ring. "Hello, David," his warm voice came through. "Uncle Frank, Margaret fired me today." I heard him sigh. "Your father worried this might happen. He told me that if Margaret ever pushed you out, it would mean she'd lost sight of what the company stands for. The review starts automatically." I told him, "I know," he said. "I got the notification an hour ago. I'll be flying in tomorrow morning." That night I didn't sleep much. I thought about Dad, about all those years working beside him, learning not just about manufacturing, but about treating people right, about building something that mattered beyond profit margins. Margaret called me at midnight. "David, we need to talk about what Margaret, you fired me. Remember, don't be childish. Tomorrow you'll receive a severance package. Take it and move on. I'll see you at the office tomorrow, Margaret." "David, you're not listening." "Oh, I'm listening." I said, "But you're not hearing. There is a difference." I hung up. The next morning I arrived at 8 sharp. Margaret was already in Dad's old office pacing. When she saw me through the glass, she stormed out. "What are you doing here?" "Working," I said, heading to my office. "You can't. You're fired." "Actually," I said, "I can." "Sit tight." "Margaret, today's going to be educational." "At 9? Uncle Frank walked through the front doors. He looked older than I remembered, his hair completely white now. But he walked with that same confident stride. He was carrying a briefcase that I recognized. It had been Dad's. Margaret came out of her office. "Uncle Frank, what are you doing here?" He smiled at her. "Hello, Margaret, I'm here to conduct the review." "What review?" "The one your father put in place, the one that activates when certain conditions are met." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." He said, "Let's go to the boardroom." "Shall we?" The same board members who voted her into power sat around that table. Uncle Frank opened the briefcase. Inside were documents that Dad had prepared years ago. He had seen this possibility, that someone might take over the company and forget its purpose. So he created a failsafe. According to these documents, Uncle Frank said if David Harper is terminated without documented cause for misconduct, the company enters a mandatory review period. During this period, all executive decisions require approval from the advisory board, which consists of whom Margaret asked. "Me," Uncle Frank said, "and 2 other people your father trusted. Until the review is complete, you remain CEO, Margaret. But you cannot make unilateral decisions." The board members looked at each other. This was news to them too. Margaret stood up. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" Uncle Frank asked. "Your father built this company on principles, treating workers fairly, maintaining quality over quick profits, staying loyal to the community. He was afraid someone might come along and strip all that away for short-term gains." Margaret sat back down. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. Uncle Frank looked at me, then back at her. "I want you to remember why your father started this company. It wasn't to make millions. It was to create something good, something that helped people. Can you do that, Margaret?" She didn't answer. Over the next 3 weeks, Uncle Frank reviewed everything. The consultants' reports, Margaret's restructuring plans, the financial statements, the worker satisfaction surveys. He interviewed employees from every department. What he found wasn't surprising to me. The company was profitable, not wildly so but steady. The workers were loyal and productive. The products were quality. Margaret's efficiency measures would have increased profits by maybe 15%, but they would have cut 60 jobs, 60 families. Uncle Frank called a final meeting. Margaret sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. "Here's what I found." Uncle Frank said, "This company doesn't need restructuring. It needs patience and steady guidance. The profit margins are healthy. The workforce is strong. The reputation is excellent." He looked at Margaret. "Your plans would have damaged all of that." But Margaret said, "No buts," Uncle Frank interrupted. "You saw numbers where you should have seen people. Just like your father feared." He turned to me. "David, you understand the heart of this business, But Margaret, you understand the financial realities. Neither of you can run this company alone. So here's my recommendation. You continue as co-executives, but with oversight. I'll stay on for 6 months, help you learn to work together, really work together, not just tolerate each other. Margaret looked at me. I don't know if I can do this, David. You can, I said. But you have to remember why Dad built this. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. The next 6 months were not easy. Margaret and I had to learn to communicate, to compromise, to see the value in each other's perspectives. Uncle Frank was patient with us. He made us spend time on the factory floor together, made us sit in on worker meetings, made us review decisions as a team. Slowly, something shifted. One day, Margaret came to my office. She looked different somehow. Softer. David, I need to tell you something. What is it? I've been thinking about the day I fired you, about why. You were laughing. I wasn't just laughing because I knew about the review. I said, then why? Because I knew Dad had faith in both of us, even when we didn't have faith in each other. He believed we could figure it out. Margaret's eyes got wet. I miss him, she said. I do too. We stood there for a moment, two aging siblings carrying the weight of our father's legacy. Then Margaret said something that surprised me. I'm sorry, David, for firing you, for losing sight of what matters. Thank you. I said, that meant more than she knew. Uncle Frank stayed the full 6 months. Then he extended it to a year, said he was enjoying being back. The consultants Margaret hired were let go. We kept all 60 employees who would have been cut, and we found other ways to improve efficiency, ways that didn't hurt people. Margaret started walking the floor. On Fridays. At first the workers were suspicious, but she kept showing up, learning names, asking about families. One day I saw her talking to Robert Chen. He'd worked on the line for 30 years. His daughter was sick. Margaret was asking about her, making notes. The next week, the company's health insurance covered an experimental treatment. Margaret had pushed it through. Robert cried when he thanked her. So did Margaret. Now here we are 2 years later. Margaret is still CEO, but we truly run the company together. The business is thriving, not because we cut costs or maximized efficiency, but because we remembered what Dad taught us, that a company is only as good as the people who work there, that profit matters but it's not the only thing that matters, that legacy is about more than money. It's about the lives you touch, the families you support, the community you serve. I'm 60 now, Margaret is 57. We talk about retirement sometimes, but not yet. We have more to do. Uncle Frank went back to Florida finally, but he calls every week, checking in, making sure we're staying true. Last Friday, Margaret and I were walking the floor together. A new hire stopped us. Young kid, maybe 25, Mr. Harper. He said to me, I just wanted to say thank you for what I asked. My grandfather worked here in the 80s. He always talked about this place, about how your father treated people right. That's why I applied when I saw you were hiring. I wanted to work somewhere that cared. Margaret and I looked at each other. That's the legacy, I said after he walked away. That's what Dad built, Margaret nodded, and that's what we'll protect. Later that afternoon, we were in my office having coffee, just like that morning 2 years ago, when she tried to fire me. Remember when I couldn't stop laughing? Margaret asked. I remember. I thought you were losing your mind. I was laughing because I knew Dad had thought of everything, that he'd protected what mattered most, not from outside threats, but from us, from our own ambitions and pride and fear. Margaret smiled. He was a smart man, the smartest. We sat there as the afternoon sun came through the window, two siblings who had nearly destroyed what our father built, but who had found their way back, found each other. Sometimes I think about that morning, standing in the boardroom, holding my coffee, watching Margaret tell me I was fired. And I still smile. Not because of what happened next, but because of what it taught us, that real success isn't measured in profit margins. It's measured in lives, in families supported, in communities strengthened, in values upheld. Dad knew that. And eventually we learned it too. Margaret and I will run Harper Industries for a few more years, then we'll pass it on to the next generation. My son James works in product development. Margaret's daughter Sarah is in operations. They're learning what we learned, that business is about more than business. It's about people. Always has been, always will be. That's the real inheritance. Dad left us, not a company, but a way of seeing the world, a way of treating people. And in the end, that's worth more than any balance sheet could ever show. Next Friday, I'll walk the floor, I'll know the names. I'll ask about families. I'll remember why we do this. And somewhere I know Dad is smiling, because his insurance policy worked, not the legal one, but the one written in the hearts of his children, the one that taught us what really matters. And I'll carry my coffee mug, the same one I had that morning. And I'll remember the day my sister fired me, and how it saved us both. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear about family, redemption, and second chances. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about real people facing real challenges. And comment below to tell us about a time when family taught you something important. Your stories matter, and we'd love to hear them. Thank you for listening.